Hey guys, tonight we begin with the hiss of oil in an iron pan, and the creak of a paper wall in the dark dot as moonlight falls through slatted screens. Someone in a bamboo hut adjusts the hem of their cotton robe, not for comfort, but for survival. The night air is crisp. The fire is low. Outside, crickets sing in rhythm with a distant waterfall. But inside, someone is already awake, already preparing to serve or to suffer. If you're still settling in, maybe leave a quiet like on this video and consider subscribing. Only if it feels right. Let me know where you're tuning in from. What time is it where you are? Because this isn't the Japan of cherry blossoms and temple bells. Not tonight. Not in the shadowed hours when tea is scarce, rice is rationed, and even silence has a cost. This is a different Japan, one of cold, floors and cramped shoulders, where survival arrives in the form of steam, routine, and obedience. There are no samurai here. No silk robes, no pages of history written in gold. Only the unnamed, the overlooked. Those who carried water until their hands blistered, and bowed until their backs forgot how to rise. In the chapters ahead, we won't climb palaces or walk among shoguns. We'll sleep beside the ash cellars. We'll crouch near the fish gutters. We'll follow barefoot children through wind-cracked fields, and watch widows preserve plums no one else will eat. You may think you know what life was like in feudal Japan, but you've likely only met its monuments. Tonight, we'll meet its shadows. The stories will be quiet. Some may be beautiful. A few uncomfortable. But all of them, everyone, belonged to someone whose name never made it into the scrolls. And by the time the dawn mist lifts from the thatched roofs, you'll understand why you wouldn't last a single day. So pull the blanket higher. Let the kettle hum. We're going somewhere very old and very cold, and we won't be alone. In the dark, the morning doesn't arrive all at once here. It seeps in slowly, like mist under a doorway, soft and uncertain. Before the sky stirs, before the rooster finds its breath, there is already movement. Not loud, not rushed. Necessary. A foot presses down on a cold wooden plank. Not because it wants to, but because it must. The roof above sighs under its own weight. Bundles of rice straw, bound so tightly they groan with every gust of wind. Outside, frost coats the edge of a bucket. Inside, the air is colder than memory, and still someone rises. They don't speak. There's no need. Words are for people with time. What matters is not saying the floor is freezing. It is knowing. And if you wait too long to rise, someone else might take the water from the well. And it's a long walk to start the day with nothing. The first task is always the fire. Coals from last night are nudged awake like children reluctant to rise. A few breaths, a few dry twigs, a whispered prayer to smoke that it won't all drift outside. Because warmth here isn't guaranteed, it's earned. The hut is small, a room, not a house. If you stand in the center, you can touch all four. Walls with outstretched arms. The ceiling hangs low, soot-smudged and quilted with spider threads. A single pot sits above the fire pit. Iron, blackened, dependable. There's not always food to put in it, but the pot remains. Because hope, like rust, is hard to scrub away. There is movement now. Another body stirring beneath a fraying blanket. A cough, a shift. Straw rustles as someone pulls away from the warmth they made with breath and body heat. You can't stretch. In a home like this, only curl, only compress, only fit. Outside, frost has crept into the corners of everything. The chickens are quiet, the ground is stiff, and nothing smells of spring. But inside, something begins to change. The rhythm of readiness. A cloth soaked in cold water scrapes across a wooden bowl. A ladle clinks. Pair of cracked heels find the straps of a worn sandal. You begin to understand. The day doesn't start when the sun rises. It starts when someone decides to move despite the cold. There is a boy here, maybe 8, maybe older. It's hard to tell when winters steal weight from bones. He sleeps facing the wall, curled so tightly you'd think he feared the air itself. His mother moves around him like a shadow, brushing soot from his sleeve, checking his feet for cracks, dipping her fingers in the ashes to dab warmth on his cheeks. A ritual of care too small for the poets to record, but big enough to make. The morning bearable dot. Sometimes there is rice. Most times not enough. So a porridge is made, barley if they're lucky, roots if they're not. It simmers without bubbles. No one eats until it is ready, but no one asks when that will be. The fire decides, and the fire is moody in winter. A rooster calls, late as usual, but no one minds. They've been up longer than the birds. Hunger, after all, doesn't wait for daylight. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. The sound of a ladle dipping, the steam that fogs the small window of oiled paper, the clink of a cracked bowl placed in the child's hands. He eats slowly, eyes half closed, as though afraid if he finishes too quickly, he'll wake up hungry again. He probably will. His father, already outside, tends to something with rope and straw, maybe a fence, maybe the roof. The work never ends. In fact, it rarely begins. It just continues. No start, no stop. Only breath and duty. There are neighbors, other huts, other lives beginning in parallel silence. A woman squats by a frozen stream, breaking the crust of ice with bare hands. An old man digs through the ash pile behind his door, looking for unburned wood. A child sniffs his sleeve, trying to decide if it smells clean enough for temple school. Everyone pretending not to notice the cold in the same way you pretend not to notice hunger, politely and with great effort. By now, the sky has turned from black to bruised purple. The birds begin to call again. The chickens scratch half-heartedly at the frost-bitten earth. And somewhere in the distance, a flute plays. Not well, not loudly, but as if to say, we are still here. And they are. Inside the hut, the pot is empty. The boy wraps himself in a coat still damp from yesterday's rain. The mother ties back her hair with a strip of linen that used to be a curtain. The father steps through the doorway, nods once, and they all move, not together, but not alone. Either. Because beneath the rice straw roofs of feudal Japan, life wasn't made of swords or scrolls. It was made of mornings like these, slow, smoky, and survived. Hunger doesn't cry out in feudal Japan. It waits. It lingers in the corners of the room like yesterday's smoke. It curls beneath sleeping mats and settles in the folds of sleeves. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is daily. And sometimes it is served in a bowl. The boy doesn't ask what's for dinner. He already knows. There is no rice in the chest, no barley in the jar, no fish in the pot, just water and stones, flat ones scrubbed smooth from years. Beside the river, gathered not for building, but for pretending. Tonight, they'll boil the stones. Not to eat them. Of course, not yet. But to chase away the silence. A bubbling pot makes a family feel like they're eating, even if there's nothing inside that can be chewed. The warmth, the smell of steam rising, the sound of simmering, it fools the stomach long enough to sleep. The mother ladles the broth into 2 bowls. The third bowl, the one the child used yesterday, stays on the shelf. A cracked thing, mended with twine. They'll say he ate earlier. They'll say he's asleep. They'll say something, because what else is there to say? Steam rises like a prayer no one believes in anymore. And still, they blow on the rim of the bowl, lift it with both hands, and sip. Not because it's food, but because it's ritual. It gives shape to the evening. It gives the illusion of ending not outside. The sky has already gone black. A moon is a sickle behind gauze. Somewhere in the village, a dog whines. Somewhere else, a neighbor coughs so harshly it rattles the roof. But here, inside this quiet hut, there are only 2 bowls, 2 spoons, and the memory of fullness. The boy stirs beside the fire. His stomach growls, but he doesn't say a word. He learned long ago that hunger isn't always solved, it's just endured. And when he dreams, he doesn't dream of feasts. He dreams of warm stones that taste like rice, and broth that never runs dry. The stones clink as they're removed from the pot. They're set aside to cool, wrapped in cloth, and later placed near the bedding, not for eating, but for heat. Their usefulness has shifted. Like most things here, they are made to do more than one thing. They are patient. Like the people, there is no dessert. Just the last bit of steam, dancing in the air like a spirit that knows not to stay too long. Hunger here is not an event. It is a shape, a silence between footsteps, a skipped breath between words. It's the space between the pot and the spoon. The child doesn't cry. He licks the inside of his cup, carefully, like it might matter. It does. Later, someone knocks on the door. Just once, then again, a pause. Then footsteps walking away. No one opens it. No one speaks. They just listen and breathe and wonder who else is boiling stones tonight. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. There are old stories, whispered ones, about poor farmers boiling bark, straw, even pieces of rope when the weather was cruel. They say if you boil something long enough, the flavor of hope seeps into the water. But they don't say what happens when hope itself runs dry. Tonight, there's no need to pretend. They sit beside the hearth in silence, wrapped in layers of cotton and ash. The mother hums a lullaby, a slow, ancient thing with no words and no beginning. No one told her to smile. No one expected it. Work was survival, and the stink was part of her now. Fish guts in her hair, scales clinging to her cheeks. Brine soaked so deep into her sleeves, she carried the ocean with her, even in sleep. She washed, of course. Scrub it until her skin turned raw, until her fingernails were pink with vinegar. But the scent never left. The water never forgave her at the market. Children whispered, "There goes the fish girl." Not cruel. Just true. She didn't mind. Not really. It meant they knew who she was. In a world where most girls disappeared into baskets, behind doors, beneath rules, she had a scent. A name whispered by noses and turned heads. A presence that entered a room before she did in the evenings. Her mother rubbed camellia oil into her hair, pretending it would make a difference. Her father didn't notice, or pretended not to. He only asked how many crates they'd filled, how many eyes were glassy, how many mouths were stiff, and she answered. Always. Once, she tried to wear a ribbon in her hair, red silk fraying at the edges. She thought maybe it would catch someone's eye, maybe shift the story of her for a moment. But the ribbon smelled of mackerel by midday, and by dusk, she left it by the gutter. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. Some nights, she dreamed of gardens. Not because she loved flowers. She didn't even know their names. But because she imagined what it might be like to carry a scent that people chased instead of avoided. To smell like spring, like sweetness, like something untouched by rot. But morning always came. The tide always returned. And the fish, well, the fish didn't care about dreams. She worked quietly. Always had. Her movements were fast, sure, practiced. She could clean 10 sardines in the time it took someone else to blink. She knew the feel of each kind, the brittle snap of smelt, the thick bones of carp, the strange softness of eels. She didn't flinch, didn't gag. Not anymore. Even the cats kept their distance. There was something in her smell that warned them she was not prey and not quite friend. When she walked home, she carried her bucket low and her shoulders lower. Her back ached. Her feet squelched in shoes that never quite dried. But she didn't complain. There were worse things than smelling of fish. Like being hungry. Like being useless. Like being forgotten. She was none of those in the hut. She sat by the window, such as it was. A hole patched with rice paper and hope. She sipped broth while staring at the sea she never admired. It was there, always, like her work. Unmoving. Even when it danced one day, someone would ask her name and not wrinkle their nose. Maybe they'd touch her wrist and not recoil. Maybe they'd say, "I know that smell," and mean it kindly. But not today. Today, she tied her sleeves back. Again, took a rag to the knife, picked the scales from her fingernails, and waited for tomorrow. Because in feudal Japan, not all girls were painted or poised or crazed. Some were covered in salt. Some smelled of fish. And some, like her, were carved out of the sea itself, sharp, silent, and always returning with something no one else was willing to touch. Ash is supposed to disappear. That's its job, to rise, to drift, to scatter into nothing. But for her, it stayed. It clung to her sleeves, settled in the crook of her neck, lived in her hair like a second scalp. She didn't mind, not really. Ash meant warmth had once lived where she stood. It meant someone had burned something to survive. And now, that something was hers. She didn't have a trade, exactly. She wasn't a washerwoman or a weaver or a seller of fish. She was a collector of what no one wanted, what everyone had and no one kept. She sold ash. By the pouch, by the scoop, by the whisper of usefulness, people pretended not to need. In feudal Japan, ash had value, strange as it sounds now. It scrubbed stains from robes. It dried oil from pans. It helped clean teeth, tan hides, preserve ink. It was the residue of effort, burned down into powder, still useful in the right hands. And hers were the right hands. She rose before the light came and followed the smoke. Chimneys didn't exist in the alley homes, only holes in ceilings or doors left ajar. She'd watch for trails of morning fire, count where the warmth had been, then visit hours later with her basket and broom. No one greeted her. They didn't have to. The poor understood each other without words. Ash from pine burned differently than from cedar. She could tell by texture, by smell. The best was soft, pale, powdery, like the skin of old paper. Some days she'd find only clumps, still damp from boiled roots, useless for trade. Those days she carried less. She was never empty-handed, but rarely full. The village children laughed once, watching her brush a pile into her sleeve. They called her Crow Girl. She didn't turn. Crows are clever. Crows survive. Let them laugh. She stored her bounty in cloth sacks, tied with strips of reed. Her hut smelled of burnt things, but it was steady. She traded ash for rice ends, for sour plums, for old sandals with more hole than sole. Barter is a delicate language, and she spoke it fluently. No one asked her name. They called her that girl with soot on her cheek, or the one who always smells like smoke. She answered to both. She answered to neither. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. One day, she found something strange, a mound of ash so white, so perfectly sifted. It shimmered in the sun like powdered pearl. She paused, bent down, scooped a little into her hand. Still warm. She looked up. The house was empty. Burned, perhaps, or abandoned in the night. She didn't ask questions. She filled her sack, thanked the air, moved on. Some might say it was wrong to take what came from misfortune. But here, misfortune was the river they all drank from. You took what floated by. If you didn't, someone else would. She had no mirror. But if she had, she wouldn't have recognized the woman behind the ash. Her hair had grayed prematurely, not from time, but from the layers of soot it held. Her skin was dry in places others, rarely touched. But her eyes were sharp, watchful. Like coals that refused to go cold. Once, a monk asked if she wanted to pray. She said no. The gods had their altars, and she had her basket. Let them count incense while she counted grams of charcoal. Still, sometimes, when she passed the temple gate, she bowed her head, not from belief, but from muscle memory. Some rituals stick whether you mean them or not. There were good days. Once, a woman gave her a sweet bean cake for a pouch of pure cedar ash. She didn't eat it right away. She sat in the shade, unwrapped it slowly, and stared at it as if it were gold. It wasn't, but it was soft and sweet, and didn't taste like smoke. She ate half. Saved the rest. Another day, it rained too hard to collect. She sat under a merchant's awning, watching the gray sky melt into the roofs. The ash in her satchel grew heavy with moisture. Useless now. But she didn't cry. Crying like fire left behind something fragile. Instead, she sang, quietly, a tune her mother once hummed. While washing bowls, it was a song with no words. Just ash and breath, floating upward. Her neighbors rarely saw her come or go. But when their floors were clean, when their ink set smoothly, when their robes no longer stank of oil, they knew someone had passed through. And they nodded, even if she never looked up. She wasn't famous, wasn't feared, but she was necessary. And in a world where so much vanished, so much scattered with the wind, she had found a way to make ashes stay. He didn't remember how he got there, just that the barrel was warm and round and dark in a way that made him feel invisible, which in feudal Japan was sometimes the safest thing to be. It had once held sake, brewed in the back room of a crumbling storehouse where workers sang less and coughed more. Now, empty and left behind, the barrel had found new purpose. Not for aging rice wine, but for sheltering a boy whose name no one asked. The scent of the wood was permanent, a mix of sour alcohol, sweat, and time. Most people recoiled from it. He didn't. He sank into it like a memory, curled like a question mark. His legs didn't fit perfectly anymore. His shoulders brushed the sides when he turned, but it held him. And sometimes being held was enough. By day, he did what street children did. Wandered, waited, watched. He wasn't a thief, not exactly. But if a fish rolled off a cart or a rice ball went unguarded, he didn't ask permission. Hunger taught him not to. The brewers didn't chase him, not anymore. He stayed quiet, didn't break things. And he smelled enough like the place that even the rats assumed he belonged. He lined the inside of the barrel with straw one winter, took the stuffing from an old sandal, and made a kind of pillow. Found a rusted tin that he used as a bowl, a drum, a shield, depending on the day. Each item meant something. Even broken things had use. Especially broken things. At night, the wind slid through the walls of the brewery. Thin wood did little to stop it. But the barrel was round. The cold found its way in eventually, but it had to curve and crawl. That delay, however small, meant the difference between shivering and sleeping. He could hear the workers. Sometimes, laughing, coughing, arguing over coins or grain. He didn't envy them. They slept on mats and had wives who wept for them. He slept in a barrel and no one asked where he went. Freedom, he thought, was just another kind of loneliness. He sang sometimes, softly, barely a hum. Melodies he made up, or ones stolen from temple chants. The barrel turned his voice into something round and echoing, like he was talking to a ghost who always agreed. Once, a cat tried to sleep beside him. It curled near his feet, blinked once, then vanished into the dark. He didn't mind. Even shadows needed space. He kept things hidden. A rock that looked like a turtle, a coin he never spent, a feather wrapped in cloth. Tiny trophies from a world that never gave him anything gently. The rock he talked to, the coin he flipped. The feather he kept for luck, even though luck never stayed long. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe. If you'd like more nights like this. He met a girl once who sold charcoal. She was older. Her hands were cracked in ways his weren't yet. She asked him what he was doing in a sake barrel. He said, waiting. She laughed, a dry little sound, then gave him half her dumpling. He never saw her again, but he thought of her whenever it rained. Rain sounded different inside the barrel. It didn't fall. It tapped, like fingers drumming gently on the lid of a secret. He used to count the drops. Then he lost count, and he fell asleep. Some nights he dreamed of rivers. Not the kind with fish or boats, but the kind made of light. Rivers of stars that he floated down, never wet, never cold. He didn't believe in gods, but if they existed, he hoped their voices sounded like water. He had a name once. A short one. He remembered it when he was tired. But it didn't matter now. The barrel didn't care. It didn't ask. It didn't judge. It just stayed. And that was more than most things. There were bad nights. Nights when someone stumbled too close. When a boot thudded against the side of his shelter. When a lantern glowed too long in the dark. On those nights, he didn't breathe. He became smaller than silence. But the mornings always came. Slowly. Through gaps in the roof. Through smells of yeast and old grain. Through the echo of men coughing the way old houses do. Suddenly, and without warning, he'd emerge like a shadow unfolding. Stretch, scratch, step barefoot across cold stone, and disappear into the alleys, into the noise, into the city that didn't know it had cradled a child in the belly of a barrel. In a world full of straight lines and hard edges, he'd found something round, something quiet, something that held him without asking for anything back. And when someone finally rolled that barrel away, years later, after the brewery burned or changed hands, they found a single feather, a smooth stone, and the mark of someone who once curled their dot, a boy, a song, a sleep, all kept in the hollow of something no one thought to treasure. The snow didn't fall like a threat. It came slowly, almost politely, a soft hush upon the rooftops, a whisper laid gently across the ground. It didn't scream, didn't sting. Not at first. But it stayed. It lingered longer than expected, settling deep into the seams of village life, into the straw of the roofs, into the folds of sleeves, into the joints of knees. And with it came a stillness, not peace, but something quieter. A pause, a waiting. Inside the homes, breath became visible. Not poetic, not mist curling like poetry in the dark. Just breath, a simple wet puff of proof that you were still here. Blankets were shared, not out of affection, but necessity. You learned to lie still, to press skin against skin, not for love, but for heat. Children stopped squirming. Elders stopped complaining. Even the dogs curled tight, as if trying to become smaller than the cold. And then the fire died. It always did. Eventually. First, the flames grew shy. Then the coals blinked out one by one, like the eyes of someone too tired to stay awake. There was no more wood. Not unless you were willing to burn something else. a stool, a broom handle, the edge of the door. Some did dot, others didn't. Others let the dark come, let the cold have its way. And so the snow, soft as it was, became a blanket. Not warm, not kind, but complete. It covered everything. The roof, the fields, the sleeping child whose mother wept too quietly to wake him. Outside, nothing moved. Not the oxen, not the wind, not even the lanterns dot inside. The silence thickened. Words grew too expensive to speak, because every exhale stole warmth. Every sentence risked frost. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below, and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. They say you don't feel it at first. That kind of cold, it creeps in like regret. Starts in the toes, moves upward. Not sharp, not painful, but slow, like forgetting. A numbness. A peace you didn't ask for, but don't have the strength to refuse. A boy near the edge of town learned to survive by wrapping his hands in straw dipped in oil. He'd light the tips, just barely, a flicker, a bite of flame, then blow it out and press his fingers to the embers. He did it so often, his skin turned gray. But gray was better than blue. Blue meant it was too late. A woman in another hut layered herself in rice sacks, cut them into robes. She wore 6, walked like a scarecrow, laughed once when she saw her reflection in a puddle, said she looked like a bag of grain that learned to walk dot. No one else laughed. No one had the breath, sometimes. The snow would fall inside, through the roof, through the holes no one had patched in time. Tiny flakes drifting past the ceiling like curious spirits, and no one brushed them away. What was the point? Let them stay. Let them be still dot in one home. A child asked if snow was made of feathers. His sister told him yes. White feathers from a giant bird that lived above the mountains, shaking its wings to make the world forget its own weight. He believed her, because the snow made everything quiet, even fear, even hunger dot in feudal Japan. Winters didn't scream. They whispered, and that whisper was worse, because it made you listen, made you notice every failing, the broken sandals, the cracked bowls, the missing father who left for firewood and didn't return dot one night. Someone lit incense just to pretend it was enough to warm the air. The smoke curled upward, disoriented, unsure of its purpose. But it smelled like something remembered. That was enough. Sometimes smell alone could comfort. A girl stitched a quilt from her mother's robes, used the needle her grandmother gave her before she forgot how to hold things. The quilt wasn't thick, but it was full of ghosts, she said. And ghosts are warm when they want to be. They all learn tricks. Tricks to trick the cold. Rubbing salt on hands, breathing into sleeves, wrapping rice in paper to keep the heat in just a little longer. None of it worked forever, but forever wasn't the goal. Morning was, and when morning finally came, it didn't bring warmth. Just light, pale and useless, but light nonetheless. The snow stayed, but it felt different by then. Less like a threat, more like a presence. Something they'd outlasted. Something they now wore on their shoulders, in their lungs, in the quiet way they moved. Because when firewood runs out and food is scarce, and your breath is louder than your voice, the snow becomes a blanket, and you learn how to sleep beneath it. The forge never rested. Even when the rest of the village fell to silence, even when winter bit into the eaves and children pressed their ears to the floor to listen for warmth, the forge burned on dot. It didn't roar. It throbbed. A pulse of heat, a heartbeat made of iron and wool dot, and beside it, always, was the man. The bladesmith, stooped, soot-covered, bare arms laced with scars. His hammer was louder than his voice, and his breath came in puffs of steam between swings. He made tools for harvest and swords for men who would never return. But this is not his story. She was there too. You might not have noticed her at first. People rarely did. She moved like smoke, quiet, constant, curling around the edges of everything. The forge was his, but the rhythm of its days belonged to her. She rose before he did, lit the charcoal while the stars still hung in the sky, scraped ashes from the night's work, boiled tea if there was any, sometimes just water if there wasn't. She didn't speak. Not out of fear, not exactly, but because there was nothing useful in her words. The hammer spoke loud enough for both of them. Her robes were singed at the hem. Always. She stopped trying to mend them. The holes near her sleeves were permanent now, little knobs that spoke only of labor. Her hands were stiff from years of wringing wet cloth, turning bellows, tending the burns. She carried the fire on her skin, and no one called it holy. They were never cruel to each other, not exactly. But kindness was measured differently in homes like theirs. A cup left warm, a coat draped without comment, a nod instead of a scold when the tongs fell. Once, early in their marriage, she asked him if he feared the blades he made. He had looked at her, surprised, then said only, "No, I fear dull ones." She never asked again. If you're enjoying this, pace already. Leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. The forge was a strange kind of music. Not pleasant, but steady. The clang of hammer to steel, the hiss of water on hot iron, the grunt of breath. Her own movements became part of it. The dip of a ladle, the scrape of a whetstone, the thud of split wood dropped neatly by the door dot. Sometimes she dreamt of silence. Real silence. Not the forge's rhythm, not the hiss of oil, not the growl of coals, but a silence so complete it would make her cry. Just once, just to feel that she still could. But silence like that is a luxury. Like lace, like softness dot instead. She sang, softly, wordless songs passed down from women who had married fire before her. The kind of songs you hum to a baby or to a wound. He didn't mind the singing, didn't mention it, just worked. That was his way. She was neither ornament nor interruption. She was necessary. Like breath, like fuel dot, there were no children. Some would say they never had the time. Others would guess they'd lost one. Neither story is right. The truth was simpler. The fire took all of them. It gave them work. It gave them purpose. But it left no room for more dot. She watched the blades take shape, sometimes curved, sometimes straight, always deadly. She knew their names, not the fancy ones given by samurai, but the secret names they carried in her mind. This one will break. That one won't leave blood. This one will outlive us both. Her favorite was a blade he never sold. Slightly bent, a flaw in the metal. Useless to warriors, but beautiful in its imperfection. It hung on the wall. Not proudly, but quietly. She polished it every spring and told it stories when no one was listening. On her quietest nights, she imagined herself a sword, folded, tempered, silent, waiting in the dark for someone to recognize her worth. But most days, she was a whetstone. And whetstones don't dream dot, they simply endure. She wore her hair high to keep it from the sparks, wore her sorrow low where no one could reach it. And when her husband died, not suddenly, not traumatically, just one day not waking, she didn't weep dot. She stoked the fire, picked up the hammer, and did what she had always done. She worked, because some lives are not stories. They are echoes. And some women are not wives. They are the silence that lets the fire be heard. The road stretched forward like an old promise, worn thin, cracked in places, always slightly out of reach. It wasn't paved, it wasn't straight, but it knew where it was going, even if you Didn't. He walked it barefoot, Dot, not because he wanted to. Not because he was some stoic monk shedding material things. No, his sandals had simply given up. One strap snapped, the other frayed. And in feudal Japan, when something broke, you didn't replace it. You endured it. The path bit back. Pebbles jabbed his heels like quiet curses. Cold puddles gathered between his toes. Dust caked into the creases of his skin. After a few miles, he stopped noticing. Pain becomes background music when no one changes the tune. He wasn't a criminal. Not yet. Just someone trying to get from one village to the next. Maybe for work. Maybe for food. Maybe just to leave behind whatever silence had grown too heavy back home. But on roads like this, intention didn't matter. Only feet did, and his were cracked open like split wood. Dot. There were checkpoints. Always manned, always suspicious. Travelers without papers were questioned. Travelers without sandals were ignored. Pitied, sometimes, but never trusted. A man walking without shoes had nothing to lose. And nothing to steal is dangerous in its own way. Dot. So he avoided the checkpoints. Took the long routes. Through woods, through streams, through rice paddies ankle deep in leftover water and gossip. He learned which fences had holes, which dogs barked more than they bit. He didn't run. That would look guilty. He walked slow, like he belonged to the road. Sometimes he passed shrines, tiny ones, barely more than a roof over a stone. He'd pause, not to pray, just to breathe, just to pretend for one moment that someone was watching kindly. The gods didn't need sandals. After all, maybe they understood. The nights were worst. Roads disappear in the dark. Sounds get louder. Trees become faces. Owls ask questions in a language you can't answer. He'd lie beneath branches and curl his legs tight. Try to pretend his feet didn't throb. Try not to dream of hot baths. And straw mats. Dot, and then morning would rise. Not kindly, but clearly. The road would return. Dusty, rude, indifferent. Still he walked. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. Sometimes, other travelers passed him, men on horseback, merchants with carts, monks, with their bowls and robes. Few made eye contact. One did. A boy, not much older than him, offered a half-dried persimmon without a word. They sat together briefly, eating in silence. Then parted. No names exchanged. Just two people who'd learned the same truth, that kindness is most honest when it doesn't expect anything back. His feet bled, eventually. The skin peeled. He wrapped them in cloth torn from his own robe. They looked like ghosts, mummified memories of movement. Still, he walked. Dot. He stopped measuring time in days. He started measuring it in rivers crossed, in trees passed twice, in the way the wind shifted around certain bends. He passed a house once, not abandoned, but empty for the afternoon. Shoes lined up at the door, clean, dry, waiting. He stared at them for a long time, then kept walking, because some things weren't meant for him. Dot. In one village, he earned a bowl of soup by helping an old woman carry firewood. She gave him an onion too, small, hard, but his. He thanked her. Didn't eat it for 3 days. When he finally did, he cried more than he expected. Not because of the onion. Not really. They say roads connect people. But some roads only teach you how far away everything really is. There were times he forgot why he was walking. The purpose unraveled like a frayed rope, thread by thread, step by step. What remained was the motion, the rhythm, the quiet drumbeat of bare soles against earth. One more mile, one more bend, one more breath. Dot. Then came the rain. Not a drizzle, a wall. It fell hard, sudden, without apology. The kind that flattens paths and blurs vision. He slipped once, caught. His knee. The mud swallowed his pace, sucked at his ankles like it wanted to keep him. He laughed, loudly, the kind of laugh that comes from nowhere and feels like rust breaking loose inside your chest. The rain didn't care, but the road seemed to soften for a moment. He arrived, eventually, to a town not much different from the one he'd left. No welcome, no warmth, just fewer questions. He found a corner beneath an overhang. Sat, rested, looked at his feet, bruised, bandaged, bare. The road had taken everything except his breath. And for now, that was enough. Because even in feudal Japan, where names could vanish, and sandals could rot, and roads could outlast memory, some kept walking. And in their quiet, cracked footsteps, history carried on. The temple was high on the hillside, where the wind forgot how to be gentle. The trees grew in disciplined rows, planted long ago by hands that had since returned to dust. Inside the gate, everything whispered. Stone, straw, footfall, even the wind itself, all softened out of respect. The boy walked with care, not because the ground was sacred, but because he didn't want to be noticed. He wore the robes they gave him, too big, too rough, tied in a knot that dug into his ribs. His head had been shaved 3 weeks earlier. His scalp still itched. No one offered ointment. That, like most things, was a test. He passed most of them, but he still missed his mother. He wasn't supposed to. That's what they said. Attachment leads to suffering. Suffering leads to desire. Desire leads to ruin. He'd chanted it daily, under his breath, through cracked lips. But the words didn't make the ache smaller. They only made it quieter. He remembered the way she tucked the blanket around him when he was sick. How her hands always smelled of rice water. How her voice, though never loud, filled the room like warmth. Here, the only warmth came from the incense. And even that didn't last long. The days were strict. Wait before dawn. Kneel. Clean. Sweep the stones, each one, even if they weren't dirty. Chant. Copy scripture until your fingers cramped. Eat in silence. Bow again. And again. Silence was a virtue. Silence was the goal. But he had grown up in a house where people spoke. Softly, yes, but often. Now his voice was rust. Every time he opened his mouth, it felt like breaking a rule. Sometimes at night, he would whisper to the wind, not loud, just enough. A single word, maybe two. Mother, still here. He knew she wasn't, but saying it made the walls feel less empty. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. One of the older monks had noticed his struggle. Not with discipline, the boy did everything right, but with a quiet sadness in his eyes. He gave the boy a chore few others wanted, tending the garden that grew behind the temple wall. It wasn't much. Just moss and stones and a single plum tree, but it was something alive, something he could touch without being punished. He swept the fallen blossoms with care, watered the roots, watched ants drag crumbs across stones. And slowly, the silence there began to feel different. Less like a punishment, more like permission. Still, there were moments when the ache returned, like when he smelled plum vinegar, or when the bell rang at dusk, long and low, the same note his mother used to hum while washing his clothes. He would bite his tongue hard to stop the tears. The pain reminded him where he was, who he had become. A monk, they said, a student of emptiness. But he wasn't empty. Not yet. There was a night when he couldn't sleep. The tatami mat felt like stone. The air pressed against his chest. He rose, careful not to wake the others, and crept out to the temple's edge. The moon hung heavy over the valley. Pale, silent, watching, he sat, crossed his legs. Breath. Then, Softly, he spoke. Not a prayer, not a chant, just a story. He told the moon about the time he fell into the stream and came home soaked. How his mother scolded him through laughter, drying his hair with both hands. He told it how she hummed as she mended his sleeves, how she used to kiss his forehead and pretend it gave him courage. He spoke until the words became mist, until he felt warm again. The next morning, no one said anything, but someone left a rice ball at his place, wrapped in cloth, still warm, with a single umeboshi tucked inside, a sour plum, just like the ones his mother used to pack. He didn't ask who had left it. Some kindnesses are meant to stay anonymous. He stayed at the temple. He grew taller, quieter. His hands grew calloused, his chants deeper. But he never forgot Dot, and in the quiet corners of his heart, he left the door open for her voice, for her warmth, for the paper walls were thin. Everyone knew that. Even the mice moved carefully, afraid their footsteps might echo. Secrets didn't stay secret for long behind shoshi screens. Sound slipped through like wind. And shadows told the truth whether you wanted them to or not. He waited until the lamps were low, not out of malice. He wasn't cruel, just cold and hungry, and tired of waiting for kindness to arrive. The house wasn't grand. A single room, half a garden, and walls made from bamboo slats and rice paper. But it had warmth. A fire that had burned long enough to smell like soup. That was enough. He crouched just outside the edge of light. Not quite in the bush, not quite in the path, just between. That in-between space where people disappear when they're no longer useful and not yet missed. His breath clouded in the air. He waited Dot inside. Someone coughed, a quiet, wheezing sound. An old man, maybe, or a sick child. Either way, the house would sleep heavily. He hoped. He didn't plan to steal much. Just food. Maybe a scrap of cloth if it wasn't being used. Something to wrap his feet. His toes had gone numb 2 days ago. He missed the feeling of them. Dot. The bamboo rustled in the wind. It cast long, slender shadows across the wall, curved like spears, trembling like reeds. The moon behind him was fat and bright, and he cursed it under his breath. Darkness had always been his ally, but tonight it felt thin. He moved, slowly. One step, then another. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below, and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. The wall was older than it looked. The paper sagged at the seams. He pressed one finger to the corner, peeled it back just enough to peek through. There was a pot near the fire. Steam, barely. Beside it, a bowl, half full, a pair of chopsticks resting gently across the rim. There, beside the fire, a woman, not asleep, not startled, just watching him. She didn't speak, didn't move. Her eyes were soft, not sharp, as if she had seen his kind before and knew the script by heart. He froze. The wind shifted. Bamboo creaked. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then fell silent. Still, she didn't move. He pulled back from the wall, took one breath, then another. He waited for a shout, for the clang of a pot, for anything, but all he heard was the fire. Then, softly, impossibly soft, the door slid open, just enough. No more than a whisper's width. Steam rolled out. The smell of broth. Miso and old rice. No words. Just the bowl, moved gently to the edge of the step, placed like an offering. Like a story she didn't have time to tell. He stepped forward, slowly, carefully, took the bowl, nodded Dot, and backed away. She slid the door closed. He ate beside the bamboo, slowly, gratefully, letting the heat return to his fingers, his belly, his breath. The shadows on the wall shifted as he ate. Bamboo danced like ghosts. The moon kept its watch. He didn't take anything else. Not the cloth, not the pot, just the warmth, just the gesture. Later, as he curled up beneath the trees, bowl tucked beneath his chin, he thought of her. The way she looked at him, not like a thief, not like a ghost. A boy in need of soup at the paper wall held her shadow long after the fire died, a soft outline, a silhouette of kindness. In feudal Japan, not all crimes were punished. Some were understood, and some, just once in a while, were fed. Memory of a woman who once told him, "You don't need to speak loudly to be heard." So he didn't. He just listened. And in the hush between temple bells, when the wind paused and the world exhaled, he felt her there. Still. The steam rose before the sun did, not in elegant tendrils, not in delicate coils that danced like calligraphy. No, it rose thick and fast, like breath held too long, and exhaled all at once. The bathhouse woke not with bells, but with buckets. Splashed, dragged, slammed against stone. She was already there, kneeling by the edge of the tub, brush in hand, sleeves wet, knees numb. The stones beneath her had not been warmed. They never were. But she didn't flinch. The heat came later, from the steam, from the rhythm, from the ache in her arms. Was no glamour in a bathhouse worker's life. Only heat, mildew, and routine. The women who came to bathe didn't notice her. They noticed when the water was dirty, when the towels were rough, when the tiles were cold. But her, she was just part of the walls. That was the goal. Her broom was cracked down the middle, wrapped with string to keep it from splitting. She swept carefully, as if one more careless motion might be its last. There was no money for another. Just as there was no money for new shoes, or soap that didn't sting, or meals that left you full. The bathhouse filled slowly. First, the quiet ones. Old women with stiff backs, who sighed as they lowered into the water. Then the gossipers, whose voices sliced through steam like knives. Then the mothers, scolding their children for splashing too much, or for not scrubbing behind. Their ears. She moved among them like smoke, gathering discarded cloths, refilling buckets, scooping out clumps of hair with a carved wooden ladle. Her eyes stayed low. Her hands never stopped. Once, a woman asked her name. She lied, gave the name of a flower she'd never seen. It felt strange on her tongue, soft, useless. Later, she whispered it to herself, just to remember how it sounded. The walls of the bathhouse wept, not metaphorically, but literally. Condensation clung to every surface, dripped down wooden beams, soaked into the floor. The smell was a stew of sweat, salt, herbs, and faintly rancid soap. It never left her skin. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. In the evenings. After the last bathers left, she stayed behind to scrub the stones. No one asked her to, but she couldn't sleep unless the floor shone. It was a strange kind of pride, one with no reward, no audience. Just stillness. The owner passed her once with a nod. Not approval, not gratitude, just acknowledgement. It was the closest thing to kindness she'd received all week. She sang sometimes when the place was empty. Soft songs from her mother's voice, now faded, but not gone. The echo of her own melody bouncing back to her like a friend who never left. Once, a girl younger than her slipped and cried out. The other bathers looked away, murmured about wet floors. She knelt beside the girl, dried her eyes, pulled a steamed cloth from her belt and handed it over like a gift. The girl smiled. It stayed with her longer than the bruises on her knees. At night, she laid out her robe to dry. It never fully did. The scent of steam and soap clung to the fabric like a second skin. She didn't mind. It meant she still existed, still worked, still mattered. There were worse fates. She dreamed once of owning her own bathhouse. A small one, with real towels, with citrus peels in the water and soap that smelled like cherry blossoms. In the dream, no one shouted. No one left hair on the stones. No one called her girl, as if it were a warning. When she woke, her broom had split completely down the center. She tied it again and kept sweeping, because in feudal Japan, some women held kingdoms in their silence. Their empires were made of buckets and brushes, of tile and tenderness. And though no songs were written for them, the warmth they left behind softened even the hardest of days. The drum tower stood at the village edge, not tall, not grand, just tall enough to be feared. It was made of rough wood and quiet warnings. No bells, no flags, just a wide roof, a ladder that creaked with every step, and a drum that no one wanted to hear. He sat beneath it, wrapped in 2 robes and still not warm. The night was long. Not in hours. Time moved as it always did, but in wait. It pressed down on him, on the thatch roofs, on the shuttered windows. A kind of silence that knew how to listen. He was the watchman, not by choice, just by rotation. Every family had to send someone, and this week it was him. His brother had gone last month and came back with a cough he hadn't shaken since. There was a stick in his hand, smooth, carved at one end. Not a weapon, just a tool. He tapped it on the stones every so often, not to scare thieves, but to keep himself awake, because sleep was the real enemy. He had fallen asleep once, the first time he took the watch. Just a blink, just a moment. When he woke, a lantern had gone out, and someone's chicken coop had been ransacked. Foxes, probably. But the shame stayed longer than the tracks. Now, he stayed awake. He watched shadows stretch and shrink, listened to the moan of the wind through bamboo fences, counted stars, counted breaths, counted the beats between nothing and something. There were no lanterns allowed. Light attracted trouble. So he stared into the dark, eyes wide, seeing everything and nothing all at once. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. He thought of his mother, asleep just a few houses away. Thought of her hands, cracked from the well bucket, tucked now beneath the quilt she sewed from rags. Thought of his father's snore, like a saw catching wood. Thought of his sister, curled so tightly she seemed to vanish beneath the covers. Was watching for them. Not because he could protect them. Not really, but because it felt better than doing nothing. Once he heard footsteps, not the breeze, not a deer. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. On the far side of the path, he didn't call out, just held his breath. Then, a cough. Old man Fujiwara, probably, too proud to admit he couldn't hold his bladder. Through the night, the sound of the bucket followed, then shuffling. In silence, the watchman exhaled, let the stick fall against his shoulder. Let the wind return. He dreamed sometimes while awake. Not visions, just flashes. His old sandals cracked open. A girl's face from the well, smiling. The sound of rice hitting a pot. The drum above him, still and waiting. The drum was sacred. In theory, it was only to be sounded in times of fire, of invasion, of warning. He had never struck it. Didn't want to. Its silence was safety. Its voice, catastrophe. He leaned back against the tower. Let his head rest on the wood. Closed one eye. Just one. Let the wind speak. Let the silence carry him for a moment. Then, sat up again. Sharply. No sleep. He thought of stories the elders told about creatures in the night, foxes with human eyes, spirits that walked in the form of shadows. He didn't believe them, But he didn't not believe them either. He hummed to himself, just to push the stories away. The stars began to shift. Slowly, they bled toward dawn. That strange blue time when the world forgets whether it's night or morning. When even roosters hesitate. His hands were stiff now. The stick had fallen into his lap. He didn't move to pick it up. The village stayed still. 1 more hour maybe, and he could return. Crawl beneath a blanket that didn't quite reach his toes. Pretend to sleep. While the rest of the world woke Dot, he wondered if anyone would thank him. Probably not. That was the job, Dot, to be unseen. To be forgotten. To guard the night without expecting anything from the day. The sky turned pale. A crow called once. Then again, Dot, the watch was done. He stood, bones protesting. Climbed the ladder once. Touched the edge of the drum, gently. It was cold, unused, just as it should be, Dot, and beneath the tower, he left no mark. No sign, not only footprints. Already fading, Dot, because in feudal Japan, some heroes never raised swords. They just stayed awake. His world was rope and soul, thread and tension, straw and silence. He sat cross-legged in the doorway of his hut, eyes down, fingers moving, always moving. The sandals did not stitch themselves. They needed his attention, his stillness, his surrender. He had been a sandal maker for 32 years. Not a craftsman, not an artisan. Just someone who made shoes for feet that went farther than he ever had. Each pair left him eventually, tied together, slung over a shoulder, pressed into a satchel, or worn out of the village without a word. No one thanked him. No one ever returned. He told himself that was the point. Good sandals didn't need praise. They just needed to endure. His hands were strong, but not soft. Rope burned into the grooves of his palms. Tiny splinters lived beneath his fingernails. He didn't remove them anymore. They'd fall out when they were ready. The hut smelled of straw. Dusty, sweet, and a little sour. There were piles of rice stalk. Rope, bundles of unfinished thongs. Scraps that would become something or nothing, depending on the day. He spoke to the sandals, sometimes, quietly, gave them little instructions as he wove. You'll walk to the mountain. You'll step into snow. You'll run from something. He never knew where they went, just that they didn't stay. His own sandals were older than most, stitched from leftovers. One heel worn thin, the toe strap replaced twice. He rarely walked far. The path to the well, the way to the shrine. Once a year, perhaps, the edge of the next village. But never more. Once, as a boy, he dreamed of seeing the sea. He had stitched a perfect pair, fine cord, smooth straw, reinforced at the bridge. He'd placed them by the door, packed a pouch of rice, and written a note his mother never read. Never left. The sandals stayed by the door for 5 years. Then he sold them to a soldier. They never came back. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. He grew older, bent more, worked slower, but still the sandals came from his hands, one by one. The village knew him, not as a man, but as a station, like the potter, like the broom maker, like the woman who wove mats no one could afford to buy. He once made a pair for a bride, tiny feet, nervous smile. She said she was moving far away. Her parents cried. He didn't. He just stitched Dot. He added a tiny blue thread on the underside. She'd never see it, but he knew it was there. A secret wish for comfort. And once, just once, someone came back. A young man, lean and sunburnt, hair tied back, with a ribbon bleached by salt air. He held up his foot, sandal worn through, sole shredded, but the strap still holding. You made these, he said. The old man looked. He had. The boy grinned. They lasted. You make good shoes." Then he left. Again, the sandal maker stood there a long time, hands frozen mid-stitch, not sure if he felt pride or sadness, or both wrapped so tightly together they could no longer be unknotted. That night, he dreamed of the sea again, of waves wearing sandals, of boats with feet, of oceans paved with straw. In the morning, he stitched. Pair for no one in particular. His best yet, balanced, clean, strong. He placed them by the door. Just in case. And when the wind blew across the floor, lifting the fringe of his robe, he didn't move, just watched the door, just waited. Because in feudal Japan, not all journeys were taken by the feet that made them. Some were stitched into the soles, worn by strangers, forgotten by everyone except the one who tied the final knot. The temple bell rang once each morning. It always had. A long, deep sound that rolled down the hillside like mist, slow, sure, solemn. It marked the start of things, the first bowl of rice, the sweep of a courtyard, the silence that followed. But on this day, the bell rang twice. No one said anything at first, just paused, heads turned, hands stilled mid-task. A child dropped a stick. An old man looked up from his bowl and didn't blink, because the bell never rang twice. Not unless someone had died. The family didn't cry right away. Not here. Not. Yet, they sat in their home, the shutters pulled closed, the air inside thick with incense and memory. The fire crackled, but no one fed it. Rice steamed, but no one ate. The body lay beneath a white sheet, still warm enough to confuse the flies. He had been the grandfather, not revered, not feared, but present. He had sat near the hearth each night, picking at millet, offering quiet opinions no one asked for. He had once been a carpenter, or so they said, though no one could point to anything he built. He had simply stayed. And now he had left. Daughter knelt beside the body, her hands folded so tightly, her knuckles blanched. She whispered words that cracked before they left her lips. The grandson, only 6, didn't understand. He asked why everyone was so quiet, why the bell had rung. Twice. She didn't answer. The son stood outside, smoking, watching the village react. It didn't take long. One by one, neighbors arrived. No gifts, just bows, just presents. They didn't speak of grief. That was considered selfish. They spoke of weather, of straw, of harvests that had gone too long without rain. But their eyes kept drifting to the door. And inside, the air kept getting thicker. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below, and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. At the temple, a monk prepared the altar, brushed away last week's ashes, lit new incense with old flame. He moved without urgency. He had done this many times. Grief, after all, follows a schedule. The second bell had done its job. The village shifted into mourning, not loudly, but with small signs. Laundry was taken down. Laughter became whispers. No one swept the street that day. Even the dogs seemed slower. The daughter washed the body in silence. Warm cloth, careful hands. She wiped behind the ears, cleaned the nails, folded the arms. She had never been this close to him while he was still. She remembered how he used to sing under his breath. Never full songs. Just a note here, a hum there. Now his lips were closed. She missed the hum. The grandson brought a stick of incense and dropped it, startled by the heat. The ash scattered. No one scolded him. They just watched it fall. The funeral was brief. A monk chanted, slow, toneless, like wind caught in a cracked flute. The bell rang again, once more, but softer. This one meant passage. This one meant letting go. The body was burned, not in the village, but on the edge of the hills, where the smoke could drift upward without offense. It took hours. Long enough for the boy to fall asleep against his mother's lap. Long enough for the daughter to forget her posture. Long enough for the son to stare into the fire and wonder if anything of his father was left besides bones. Afterward, they carried the ashes home in a wooden box. No fanfare, just footsteps and smoke. At home, they placed the box beside the family altar, lit a new candle, bowed 3 times. Then sat and breathed. That night, the bell didn't ring. But the daughter thought she heard it anyway. Soft, low, not from the temple, but from inside herself. The boy asked again what it meant when the bell rang twice. She looked at him, smiled a tired smile, sighed. It means someone remembered. Once, he heard footsteps, not the breeze, not a deer. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, on the far side of the path. He didn't call out, just held his breath. Then, a cough. Old man Fujiwara, probably, too proud to admit he couldn't hold his bladder through the night. The sound of the bucket followed, then shuffling, then silence. The watchman exhaled, let the stick fall against his shoulder, let the wind return. He dreamed sometimes while awake. Not visions, just flashes. His old sandals cracked open. A girl's face from the well, smiling. The sound of rice hitting a pot. The drum above him, still and waiting. The drum was sacred, in theory. It was only to be sounded in times of fire, of invasion, of warning. He had never struck it. Didn't want to. Its silence was safety. Its voice, catastrophe. He leaned back against the tower, let his head rest on the wood, closed one eye. Just one. Let the wind speak. Let the silence carry him for a moment. Then, sat up again, sharply. No sleep. He thought of stories the elders told about creatures in the night, foxes with human eyes, spirits that walked in the form of shadows. He didn't believe them. But he didn't not believe them either. He hummed to himself, just to push the stories away. The stars began to shift. Slowly, they bled toward dawn. That strange blue time when the world forgets whether it's night or morning. When even roosters hesitate. His hands were stiff now. The stick had fallen into his lap. He didn't move to pick it up. The village stayed still. 1 more hour, maybe. Then he could return. Crawl beneath a blanket that didn't quite reach his toes. Pretend to sleep. While the rest of the world woke. He wondered if anyone would thank him. Probably not. That was the job. To be unseen. To be forgotten. To guard the night without expecting anything from the day. The sky turned pale. A crow called once. Then again. The watch was done. He stood, bones protesting, climbed the ladder once, touched the edge of the drum, gently. It was cold, unused, just as it should be. And beneath the tower, he left no mark. No sign. Only footprints. Already fading. Because in feudal Japan, some heroes never raised swords. They just stayed awake. His world was rope and soul, thread and tension, straw and silence. He sat cross-legged in the doorway of his hut, eyes down, fingers moving, always moving. The sandals did not stitch themselves. They needed his attention, his stillness, his surrender. He had been a sandal maker for 32 years. Not a craftsman, not an artisan. Just someone who made shoes for feet that went farther than he ever had. Each pair left him eventually, tied together, slung over a shoulder, pressed into a satchel, or worn out of the village without a word. No one thanked him. No one ever returned. He told himself that was the point. Good sandals didn't need praise. They just needed to endure. His hands were strong, but not soft. Rope burned into the grooves of his palms. Tiny splinters lived beneath his fingernails. He didn't remove them anymore. They'd fall out when they were ready. The hut smelled of straw, dusty, sweet, and a little sour. There were piles of rice stalk, rope, bundles of unfinished thongs, scraps that would become something or nothing, depending on the day. He spoke to the sandals, sometimes, quietly, gave them little instructions as he wove. You'll walk to the mountain. You'll step into snow. You'll run from something. He never knew where they went, just that they didn't stay. His own sandals were older than most, stitched from leftovers. One heel worn thin, the toe strap replaced twice. He rarely walked far. The path to the well, the way to the shrine. Once a year, perhaps the edge of the next village. But never more. Once, as a boy, he dreamed of seeing the sea. He had stitched a perfect pair, fine cord, smooth straw, reinforced at the bridge. He'd placed them by the door, packed a pouch of rice, and written a note his mother never read. He never left. The sandals stayed by the door for 5 years. Then he sold them to a soldier. They never came back. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. He grew older, bent more, worked slower. But still, the sandals came from his hands, one by one. The village knew him, not as a man, but as a station. Like the potter, like the broom maker, like the woman who wove mats no one could afford to buy. He once made a pair for a bride. Tiny feet, nervous smile. She said she was moving far away. Her parents cried. He didn't. He just stitched dot. He added a tiny blue thread on the underside. She'd never see it, but he knew it was there. A secret wish for comfort. And once, just once, someone came back. A young man, lean and sunburnt, hair tied back, with a ribbon bleached by salt air. He held up his foot, sandal worn through, sole shredded, but the strap still holding. You made these, he said. The old man looked. He had. The boy grinned. They lasted. You make good shoes. Then he left. Again, the sandal maker stood there a long time, hands frozen mid-stitch, not sure if he felt pride or sadness, or both wrapped so tightly together they could no longer be unknotted. That night, he dreamed of the sea again, of waves wearing sandals, of boats with feet, of oceans paved with straw. In the morning, he stitched. Pair for no one in particular. His best yet, balanced, clean. Strong. He placed them by the door. Just in case. And when the wind blew across the floor, lifting the fringe of his robe, he didn't move. Just watched the door. Just waited. Because, in feudal Japan, not all journeys were taken by the feet that made them. Some were stitched into the soles, worn by strangers, forgotten by everyone except the one who tied the final knot. The temple bell rang once each morning. It always had. A long, deep sound that rolled down the hillside like mist, slow, sure, solemn. It marked the start of things, the first bowl of rice, the sweep of a courtyard, the silence that followed. But on this day, the bell rang twice. No one said anything at first. Just paused, heads turned, hands stilled mid-task. A child dropped a stick. An old man looked up from his bowl and didn't blink, because the bell never rang twice. Not unless someone had died. The family didn't cry right away. Not here. Not. Yet, they sat in their home, the shutters pulled closed, the air inside thick with incense and memory. The fire crackled, but no one fed it. Rice steamed, but no one ate. A body lay beneath a white sheet, still warm enough to confuse the flies. Had been the grandfather, not revered, not feared, but present. He had sat near the hearth each night, picking at millet, offering quiet opinions no one asked for. He had once been a carpenter, or so they said, though no one could point to anything he built. He had simply stayed, and now he had left. Daughter knelt beside the body, her hands folded so tightly, her knuckles blanched. She whispered words that cracked before they left her lips. The grandson, only 6, didn't understand. He asked why everyone was so quiet, why the bell had rung. Twice. She didn't answer that the son stood outside, smoking, watching the village react. It didn't take long. One by one, neighbors arrived. No gifts, just bows, just presents. They didn't speak of grief. That was considered selfish. They spoke of weather, of straw, of harvests that had gone too long without rain. But their eyes kept drifting to the door. And inside, the air kept getting thicker. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. At the temple, the monk prepared the altar, brushed away last week's ashes, lit new incense with old flame. He moved without urgency. He had done this many times. Grief, after all, follows a schedule. The second bell had done its job. The village shifted into mourning, not loudly, but with small signs. Laundry was taken down. Laughter became whispers. No one swept the street that day. Even the dogs seemed slower. The daughter washed the body in silence. Warm cloth, careful hands. She wiped behind the ears, cleaned the nails, folded the arms. She had never been this close to him while he was still. She remembered how he used to sing under his breath. Never full songs. Just a note here, a hum there. Now his lips were closed. She missed the hum. The grandson brought a stick of incense and dropped it, startled by the heat. The ash scattered. No one scolded him. They just watched it fall. The funeral was brief. A monk chanted, slow, toneless, like wind caught in a cracked flute. The bell rang again, once more, but softer. This one meant passage. This one meant letting go. The body was burned, not in the village, but on the edge of the hills, where the smoke could drift upward without offense. It took hours. Long enough for the boy to fall asleep against his mother's lap. Long enough for the daughter to forget her posture. Long enough for the son to stare into the fire and wonder if anything of his father was left besides bones. Afterward, they carried the ashes home in a wooden box. No fanfare, just footsteps and smoke. At home, they placed the box beside the family altar, lit a new candle, bowed 3 times. Then sat and breathed. That night, the bell didn't ring, but the daughter thought she heard it anyway, soft, low, not from the temple, but from inside herself. The boy asked again what it meant when the bell rang twice. She looked at him, smiled a tired smile, sighed, "It means someone remembered." And he nodded, as if that made sense, because in feudal Japan, death was not a scream or a collapse. It was a sound, a single solemn note that echoed into everything. And sometimes it rang twice. The brush trembled, though the boy's hand did. Not. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. Just the weight of it. The brush, the paper, the silence around him. It all pressed down as if the world itself waited for his next stroke. The paper was thin, rice-woven, sun-dried, slightly curled at the corners. It cost more than his family earned in a week. One blot would mean more than a mistake. It would mean disgrace, punishment, maybe hunger. He dipped the brush again, just enough to draw up. Ink, not so much that it dripped. The ink was thick and dark, pressed from soot and pine oil, mixed slowly with prayer and patience. It smelled like the inside of the temple, like something old, like something watching. He was only 12. But here, in the scriptorium of the village school, he was just another pair of hands, another boy copying kanji for a teacher who rarely looked up. The man sat near the doorway, sipping tea that had long gone cold. His fan clicked open and shut. The sound was worse than a whip. The boy wrote, line after line, graceful, careful, precise dot until his finger twitched dot. It was small, barely a movement, a heartbeat out of time. But it was enough. The blot appeared like a wound, a dark bloom, where a perfect curve should have been. It spread slowly, mercilessly, across the page. The teacher saw. He always saw. The fan clicked shut. Silence cracked like ice. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below, and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. The teacher didn't shout. That would have been easier. He simply stood, took the paper, and tore it cleanly down the middle. No words, just the sound of failure folding in half. Then, a cloth. The boy held out his hand. The teacher wrapped his fingers tight. The ink wasn't hot, but the cloth burned with shame. That was the ritual. Mark the hand. Make the lesson physical. He didn't cry. That came later. He walked home in silence. The cloth still wrapped, the ink seeping through. He passed the temple bell, the bamboo well, the plum tree that never bore fruit. Everything familiar. Everything quiet. At home. His mother asked no questions. She saw the cloth, set a bowl of barley down, kissed the top of his head. He didn't eat. That night, he soaked his fingers in vinegar and rice water, scrubbing the ink with a strip of linen. It didn't come off. It never did right away. Ink, like shame, liked to linger. He stared at his hand for a long time. Not angry, just tired. He had dreamed of calligraphy. Not fame, not glory. Just the quiet beauty of it, the way a stroke could carry emotion, how a single line could feel like breath. He wanted to make words that looked like wind. But now, all he could see was the blot. The next morning, he returned. Not because he had to. He could have stopped. Many boys did. But he came back, sat, dipped his brush, his fingers still stained. He wrote again, this time slower, each stroke deliberate. He imagined he was writing not on paper, but on water, that the ink dissolved as it landed, that he could start over as many times as he needed. No one praised him, no one noticed, but the paper stayed clean. He stayed after class that day, collected the inkstones, cleaned the brushes, scraped the dried ink from the corners of the mixing slab. His hands blackened again, but he didn't mind. He looked at the teacher once. The man didn't smile, but he didn't stop him either. That night, the boy wrote in the dirt behind his house, with a stick, with a feather, with his finger when nothing else was near. He practiced curves and flicks, not to be perfect, but to remember. His fingers stayed stained for weeks. The blot, longer, but he learned something, that sometimes the mark that shams you becomes the thing that shapes you. That ink, like memory, like grief, doesn't go away because you scrub at it. It fades because you learn to write through it. And someday, maybe, his strokes would hold the wind again, and the page would forgive him. The robe had once been red, not the deep blood red of nobility, just the faded, dusty rust of a farmer's wedding day. Now, it was none of those things. It was gray at the sleeves, patched with plum-colored squares, and stitched so many times it looked more quilt than garment, but she still wore it. Every day. Because it still held together, just barely. She sat by the door with a needle in hand and thread between her teeth, head bowed, fingers hunting holes before they grew into shame. The morning light came through the rice paper window, thin and kind. It made the loose threads shimmer like spider webs. Some women owned silk, others spun cotton. But she inherited nothing but linen and patience. And patience, as it turns out, can be worn longer than any cloth. There was always something to fix. The robe, the sash, the straw mat that frayed at the corners. Even the water bucket had a crack she plugged each morning with a sliver of pine. And quiet optimism. She never complained. Complaining was for people who expected more. She had learned long ago that life gave what it could, and that sometimes that meant learning to wear your regrets. Her thread was made from scraps, pulled from old seams, twisted anew, dyed with the last bit of ash or tea. No two stitches matched. Some zigzagged like lightning. Others bent like reeds in wind. She called them all beautiful. No one else did. She mended her husband's robe the same way, quietly, while he slept, while the fire dwindled, while her bones asked to rest. He never noticed the repairs. Only the comfort of a warm shoulder in winter. That was enough. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more. Nights like this, she patched the knees of her son's work trousers 5 times before he outgrew them. Then she turned them into a satchel and a rag. Then, when even the threads gave out, a wick for the oil lamp. Nothing was wasted. She once sewed a patch shaped like a fish. Her daughter smiled, just once. The next day, it tore again. That's how it went. Threads frayed, fabrics thinned, but hands kept moving. She knew the stories of nobles who wore 10 layers of silk, whose sleeves dragged behind them like rivers. She knew of weddings where brides wore new robes stitched by grandmothers with poems inside the seams. Her robe had no poem, but it had memory. The tear along the back that happened during the winter her mother died. She'd fallen trying to carry water across the frozen path. The robe had caught on the doorframe. She never sewed that tear shut. Let it remind her. A patch over her heart that came from her daughter's first blanket. Too small to cover much now, but soft, warm, familiar. When she sewed it into her robe, she dreamed of lullabies. The cuffs stitched with black thread that came from the year of the flood. When they lost the rice, when they burned the furniture, when the only color left was the smoke in the air, she wore her life like armor, stitched, folded, patched, and softened by time. One day, the needle snapped in her hand, not with force, just wear. The tip broke, the thread slipped, and blood pooled at her thumb. She stared at it for a long time. The blood, the thread, the silence. Then she reached for another needle, because the robe still needed mending. She once wondered if heaven had robes, if they were new, if they were white and seamless. But part of her hoped not. Hoped heaven was full of garments, like hers, worn, loved, and full of stories no one could erase. And when she died, she asked only this, that they not bury her in new cloth. Let her wear her robe, the one with too many patches and not enough praise. Because in feudal Japan, not all dignity came from silk. Some came from stitches, and from hands that refused to stop sewing. Her house was the smallest on the road. A single room, a crooked roof, and a garden no larger than a mat. But it was known, not for its beauty nor its size, but for the scent. It always smelled of pickled plums. The scent curled through the bamboo fence, drifted into neighbors' windows, settled in sleeves, and lingered long after a visit. Sweet and sharp, like memory, like something you'd forgotten you once loved. She had been a widow for 11 years. Her husband died in the spring, carried off by a fever that bloomed as quickly as the cherry blossoms. He'd been a quiet man, loved fish grilled over charcoal, hummed when he washed his face, and every year, without fail, he pickled plums with her in silence. Now she did it alone. Each summer, when the fruit swelled heavy on the branch, she rose before the sun and gathered it, one by one, never pulling, always twisting. She said if you pick them with anger, they'll spoil. She salted them in earthen jars, layered them with red shiso leaves, placed stones on top, not too heavy, not too light, and waited. Waiting was her favorite part. She'd sit beside the jars, mending her robe or shelling beans, humming softly. The scent rose slowly, like a secret coming home. Sharp, bright. Patient Dot, she didn't sell them. Didn't trade. The plums were for remembering. A neighbor once asked why she made so many. She smiled and said, "So I don't forget how sweetness feels." If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. Her home was tidy. Not because she was proud, but because she had time. She swept each morning, dusted the corners, wiped the window frame with a cloth that once belonged to her daughter. She kept her husband's sandals by the door, still polished, still waiting. Every evening, she placed one pickled plum beside her rice. She ate it slowly, let the sourness fill her mouth until it reached her eyes. Then she smiled, the kind of smile you make when something hurts, but you're glad it's still with you. Her daughter visited once a season. A short visit, a quick bow, a gift wrapped in brown paper, usually tea or dried persimmons. She never stayed long. The city was far. The city was busy Dot, but once she stayed through the night, and in the morning she woke to the scent of plums. She cried, not because she was sad, but because the smell reminded her of a time before silence. That day they pickled together, knees in the dirt, fingers stained, hands moving in the same rhythm. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The jars filled quickly. The old woman labeled each one with a piece of washi paper and a single word: spring, wind, rain. His. Her neighbors said she was strange, that she talked to her jars, that she bowed to her garden, that she placed offerings of rice where no shrine stood. She didn't mind. Some memories need feeding. On the coldest nights, when the wind rattled the walls and the moon vanished behind clouds, she would sit near the jars and listen. The lids creaked. The brine shifted. The scent warmed the air. Dot. She would close her eyes and breathe. And sometimes, just sometimes, she imagined he was still there, humming softly, eating slowly, his chopsticks pausing mid-her as if waiting for her to say something that didn't need saying. She never remarried, never moved, because where else would she go when everything she loved was already inside these walls? And when her time came, they found her with a jar in her hands, wrapped in cloth, tied with string. The last of her plums. Dot. It was labeled use. They buried her with it. And the house, the crooked little house, still smelled of pickled plums long after she was gone. Because in feudal Japan, love did not always come with poems or paper. Sometimes it came with salt, and a sweetness that only sorrow could preserve. Dot. He bowed. Just not enough, not low enough, not long enough, not with the weight of shame demanded by the moment. His back curved like a question mark, but not a full surrender. His eyes dropped, but not to the earth. His hands touched his thighs, but didn't shake. Dot. It was over in seconds. But in feudal Japan, seconds could stretch into a lifetime. He had bowed to a local lord, a minor one, barely known outside this valley, but powerful enough to end a harvest, close a road, seize a home. Power clung to his robes like dust that refused to be swept, and now the son, just a farmer's boy, barely taller than the grain he harvested, had bowed just wrong enough to be remembered. That it wasn't defiance. He had practiced the motion 100 times. His father showed him how to hold the spine straight, but soft. How to lower the eyes, not as prey, but as respect. How to fold the body like cloth, neat, quiet, humble. But the moment came, and something. In him, pride or fear, or simply the stiffness of a sleepless night, held him back. The Lord said nothing, just raised an eyebrow, then turned away, and the damage was done. No punishment was spoken, no order given. But the shift came. Rice, once bound for their home, was delayed. The taxman arrived a week early. The well near their field mysteriously dried up, even though the rains had been kind. His father knew. Didn't shout, didn't accuse, just sat by the door, sharpening a sickle that didn't need sharpening. The mother wept only once, at the altar, quietly, so the children wouldn't hear. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below, and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. He tried to fix it. Returned to the Lord's compound. Asked to speak. Was denied. Bowed at the gate. Lower this time. Slower. With knees in the mud and arms trembling. No. One came out. He bowed again the next day. And the day after that. Until the guards laughed. The bow had become performance. Too late. Too much. A flower after frost. Beautiful, but useless. He walked home in silence. The field still needed tending. A straw still needed tying. But now, when he entered the market, heads turned. Not in anger, in pity. Which, somehow, was worse. A bow had broken him. Not because it was shallow, but because the world had decided it meant something more. In private, he practiced. Each night, laid a line of stones to mark where his knees should land, tied a ribbon around his waist to keep his spine from stiffening, bowed to shadows, bowed to silence, bowed until even the wind looked down at him. His sister begged him to. "Stop, you're not fixing anything," she said. He nodded and bowed. The old priest took pity, offered him a job sweeping the shrine steps. No pay, just purpose. The boy accepted. He swept in long, even strokes, counted his breaths, let his back relax, let the posture become prayer. Pilgrims passed. Some nodded. One bowed back. That night he wept. Not for shame, not for punishment, but because someone had seen him and bowed in return. It was enough. The Lord never spoke to him again. Eventually, another scandal came. A merchant's missing coin, a sanarai's drunken fall. The boy was forgotten, but he never stopped bowing. Not out of fear, out of understanding. Because in feudal Japan, a bow was not just formality. It was a language, a contract, a confession. And one day, years later, when he became a father himself, he taught his son how to bow. Not low, but deep. The kettle never whistled. It murmured. A low, gentle sound like an old man clearing his throat before telling a story. Steam rose in slow spirals. The room was quiet, still. Even the dust in the air seemed to pause and listen. This was not a tea ceremony. It was not ritualized or formal or watched by guests in silk robes. This was survival, made beautiful. She sat cross-legged on the floor, knees wrapped in 2 layers of warm cloth, her hands curled gently around a tin of leaves. Not many, just enough. Just enough to turn boiled water into something softer. The leaves were old, gathered 2 summers ago, dried in the shadow of her fence, crushed and tucked into a jar once filled with pickled turnips. The scent still clung, faintly, a quiet reminder that even beauty comes from something sharp. She poured the water with care, not ceremony. There were no measured ladles, no painted cups, just a cracked bowl with a line of soot around the rim. The kind of bowl passed down, not because it was precious, but because it hadn't broken yet. The tea turned cloudy, then pale gold. She watched. It swirled as if it might offer her answers. She did not drink it quickly. The first sip was always quiet, held on the tongue. Felt, not tasted. It was bitter, not unpleasant, but honest. Like a memory you don't speak of, but revisit when one is watching. She drank alone, but never felt lonely. The tea filled the room like company. Its warmth moved through her like breath. Not loud, not urgent, just present. Sometimes she imagined the tea speaking, whispering the things no one else said aloud. Rest now. You've done enough. It's okay to be tired. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. Her neighbors thought her strange. She grew herbs in broken pots, dried peels in her windows, boiled water at odd hours. But when they were sick or sad or too weary to pretend they were fine, they knocked on her door. She always had tea. Not for the flavor. But for the pause. Because tea meant sitting. And sitting meant breathing. And breathing meant remembering you were alive. Once, a child from the market came, eyes red, holding a cloth bundle of bruised fruit. She didn't ask why. She poured the water, let the leaves swirl, gave him half, her rice ball, and said nothing. He drank. Then left. 3 weeks later, he returned with a handful of wild mint, held out like treasure. She smiled. The leaves didn't match the tea she usually made, but they do. They do just fine. In the corner of her home, she kept a basket of discarded things, teacups with chips, tins with dents, spoons bent by accident or grief. She used them all, because beauty, she believed, lived best in what was once broken. She once had a husband who drank tea standing up, said it wasted time to sit. He died young, not from haste, but from hunger he never named. She sat alone now, always, but always with tea. In winter, the steam fought the cold. In summer, it cooled her sadness. In spring, it tasted faintly of the earth waking up. In autumn, it helped her let go. She didn't count her years and seasons. She counted them in cups. This was a rhythm. Boil, pour, steep, breathe, repeat. And when she was gone, they found her kettle still warm, leaves floating in golden water, a single cup resting by her hand. The tea had cooled, but the room still held its warmth. Because in feudal Japan, time wasn't always measured in hours or harvest. Sometimes it was measured in tea leaves, and how gently they opened in water. The snow was light that morning. Not a storm, not a blanket, just a soft hush settling over the ground like dust in a forgotten room. It touched the garden gently, laying across wilted greens and empty rows, curling around the stones that marked the corners of the plot. And there, between two cabbages that hadn't survived the frost, were tracks. Tiny, precise, diagonal. Fox tracks. She crouched beside them, small hands braced against cold knees, eyes wide. The prints weren't deep. The snow was fresh, but she could follow them. Around the daikon patch, past the plum tree, stopping just short of the bamboo gate. She gasped. Then smiled. The fox had visited. She didn't scream, didn't call for her mother. She knew better. Grown-ups said foxes were trouble, tricksters, spirits in disguise. But she liked them. She thought they walked better than people, quieter, smarter, like they knew something everyone else had forgotten. She ran back into the house, not to tell, to offer. From a shelf, she pulled a chipped bowl, the one her grandmother had let her use when the rice was burned. From the cabinet, a few grains. Not many, just enough to show respect. Then one slice of pickled radish, yellow and glistening, her favorite. She placed them by the edge of the garden, on the stone that was warm in summer but now wore a thin coat of frost. She didn't bow, but she waited, just a moment, just in case the fox didn't come back. Not while she watched, but the next morning, the bowl was empty. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe. If you'd like more nights like this, her mother said it was wind, or mice, or a stray dog. But she knew. She left offerings again. A piece of sweet potato, a coin, a folded paper crane. She whispered to the footprints when they appeared, called them by names she made up: Moonfoot, Whitetail, Smoke Runner. The garden became a temple, one no one else saw. That winter was long, the kind that turned breath to glass and froze doors shut. Her father stopped laughing. Her mother counted rice more carefully. But the girl? She watched the snow dot, and every time the tracks came, she smiled. Once, she woke to find a feather beside the bowl, pale orange, soft at the base. She tucked it into her sleeve and didn't speak of it. Some gifts are best kept secret. As the months passed, the tracks changed. Sometimes they vanished. Sometimes they circled the house. Once, they led right to her window, and then nowhere, as if the fox had disappeared into the air. She didn't feel afraid that she felt chosen. One day, her brother followed her, watched her place a bean cake by the stone. He laughed, called her silly, said foxes didn't eat sweets, said she was wasting food. She didn't argue, just left the cake, walked inside, and waited. That night, a storm came. The bowl was knocked over, the snow piled high, and in the morning there were no tracks. For a week, she cried the third night, quietly, into her sleeve. Her mother thought it was the cold, gave her extra rice. But it wasn't the cold, it was the silence. On the 8th day, the tracks returned, perfect, centered, spiraling around the bowl like a dance. The cake was gone, and in its place, a stone, round, smooth, black as ink, warm to the touch, even through the frost. She wore it around her neck, never told a soul. She grew up, as children do. The tracks came less often. The garden became crowded with chores, with firewood, with adult. Words like harvest, dowry, obedience. But still, on the first snow of every winter, she left a bowl outside, even when she had her own children, even when her hands were wrinkled, even when no tracks came. Because in feudal Japan, belief wasn't always about gods or temples. Sometimes it was about small feet in fresh snow, and offerings made to what might not have been real, but always came when most needed. He held it like it was breakable, because it was. The lantern was made of bamboo, rice paper, and hope, thin hope, the kind that fluttered in the wind. A simple handle, a flickering wick, the sort sold at market for a few coins, or made at home when coins were gone. It wasn't built for distance. It wasn't built for storms, but he carried it anyway. The road stretched ahead in silence, narrow, unlit, curved like a secret. The lantern cast a circle no wider than his shoulders, and even that flickered when the wind whispered too loud. He walked because he had to. His brother was sick, fevered, shaking. They'd sent him to fetch the midwife who lived near the river, Bend, 2 hills away. No one else could go. He was only 13. The lantern trembled in his grip. It was the only light. The moon had hidden behind clouds, and stars were swallowed by the trees. He could hear the forest, the groan of wood, the soft footfalls of night creatures, the long, low rustle of wind through dry leaves. All around him, the dark breathed, and still he walked. The flame bobbed. He shielded it with his hand, but the paper was already damp. Not soaked, just enough to wrinkle. Just enough to remind him that paper, once wet, never quite returns. To smooth. Halfway to the river, the wind picked up. He moved faster, boots slipping on loose stones. His breath came in clouds. His legs ached, but he didn't stop. Couldn't. And then it happened. The flame stuttered, reached, shrunk, and went out. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. Darkness fell like a curtain. He stood still, listening, not to the forest, to the silence inside himself. Then he moved, slowly, hands out, feet careful. He knew this path, had walked it in daylight, but now it felt like another country. Trees leaned differently. Stones rose like teeth. Everything was strange in the dark. He clutched the lantern anyway, carried it like it still glowed. Because sometimes memory is the only thing that lights the way. At the river bend, the midwife's home stood like a promise, low, wide, warm. Smoke rose from the roof. A dog barked once, and the door opened. She saw him. Mud to the knees. Lantern blackened, eyes wide. She didn't ask. Just nodded, gathered her pouch, wrapped her shawl, and followed. They walked back together in silence. She held a candle in a jar, steady, strong, protected. It lit the path better than his lantern ever had, but he didn't look at it. He kept his eyes on the road. When they reached his home, his brother still breathed, shallow, fevered. But there, the midwife went inside. Her tools clinked softly. Water was heated. Leaves steeped. The mother wept. The boy sat on the step and watched the sky begin to pale. The sun was late. Or maybe he had just walked too far. Beside him, the lantern sat like a ghost. Charred, warped, useless. He didn't throw it away. Instead, he hung it from the eave. Let it sway in the breeze. Let it tell its story, because that night it had carried him far enough. And sometimes the light doesn't need to last. It just needs to get you there. She sat by the hearth, always. Never quite on the mat, never quite in the shadows. Legs crossed, back straight, robe tucked neatly around her ankles. Her hands rested in her lap, and her eyes flickered open and closed like paper shutters in wind. She slept that way, sitting up. No pillow, no quilt, just posture, just presence, just a body so used to being alert it forgot how to lie down. The others in the house found it strange. The grandchildren whispered. The neighbors offered mats. Even her daughter, now gray-haired herself, pleaded gently. Lie down, mother. Rest. But she shook her head, slow and certain. If I lie down, I might not get up. She said it with a smile. It wasn't fear. It wasn't defiance. It was simply a truth she'd lived into. For years, she had risen before the roosters, before the frost, before the debt collectors, before the pain had time to settle in her knees. She had learned to sleep in shifts, in corners, in pauses. Sleep became a visitor, not a destination. And somewhere along the way, lying down stopped, feeling like peace, and started feeling like goodbye. So she slept upright. She dozed between fire crackles, between teacup sips, between the sighs of those who didn't yet understand the weight of their own lives. Her robe was thick, patched at the elbows, always smelled faintly of dried seaweed and smoke. Her socks were mismatched, one wool, one cotton, but no one dared mention it. She was the kind of old you don't correct. Her eyes didn't miss much. She saw who hid food, who whispered behind screens, who rose early, and who merely claimed to. She'd grunt her approval. Or not. She was old enough to remember the famine. The real one, when soup was just hot water and prayers. When a single radish could make or break a family. That memory lived in her bones, in the way she portioned rice, in the way she sniffed fish for rot, in the way she flinched when someone left light on too long. But most of all, it lived in her sleep, because back then, sleep meant vulnerability. Lying down meant someone could take your food, your warmth, your place. So she never did. If you're enjoying this pace already, leave a soft like below, and subscribe if you'd like more nights like this. At night, the fire softened. The house grew quiet. Her children lay flat, spread across tatami like shadows. But she remained